Before we get started in this episode, a quick announcement. As you know, I'm very passionate about acceptance and commitment therapy, and I also run a busy practice in Canberra. We're currently looking for psychologists who are registered in Australia to join our team, who are also passionate about learning about ACT. We provide supervision on a group and individual basis and training around ACT. So if this is you, if you're interested, please express your interest at strategicpsychology.com.au/careers. Look forward to hearing from you. And now back to this episode.
Okay, life can be crazy. You're feeling like you're sinking, just trying to find a meaning. It's time for better thinking. Yeah, better thinking. Time to tune in. Let's go.
Welcome back to Better Thinking. My name's Nesh Nikolic, and today's guest is Michael Leiter. He's an organisational psychologist who's worked here in Deakin University, Australia for 3 years and recently returned to Nova Scotia, Canada. His interest is in people and their relationship with work, their career development, work engagement, and burnout. Some amazing takeaways here in terms of how we go out and recover, and also the aspects of burnout with exhaustion, cynicism, and a lack of accomplishment. So certainly useful to listen into, particularly if you're not feeling as though you're getting as much out of work as you'd like, and some nice practical ideas to take from this. So enjoy this episode. Michael, big thank you and welcome to the show.
Good to be here.
Look, it's exciting to be talking again on this topic of, people in the relationship with their workplace, their career, burnout, that space. It's something that I've been looking into for a little bit now, and I thought it's fantastic to have someone who's learned and has research in the area and has a lot more to say from a professional space rather than just what we as lay people just think. We're like, oh, the reason is this, the reason is that, as to why people are either satisfied in their jobs or dissatisfied in their jobs. So really appreciate you coming on to discuss all those areas.
Oh, great. It's great to be here. And it's an important issue and one of growing concern, I think, pretty broadly these days.
Tell me a little bit about the work that you've done in this area. I know that you're an organisational psych. What's the sort of work that you've focused on, looked at that's been, I suppose, dearest to you?
Well, as you say, this organisational psychology, which means my focus is a lot more about what's going on between people than what's going on within people. So I don't go into the depth psychology kinds of ideas very far. I'm more comfortable looking at how are people interacting with each other, what are the environments that they create for one another and for themselves to do their work in, and how are those put together in a way that really helps them connect with what they want to accomplish through their life, through their work, and what are how can you make those environments better for them so that they're able to just become who they want to really be and to live the life they really want to live. So that's pretty much where my focus has gone. And I work with organizations. Mostly healthcare has been the major settings that I've worked in, partly because I like that they're big organizations, and for the kind of research I do, you want to have a lot of people and you want to sort of see how it works. But hospitals are particularly big, complicated organizations. And one part of it can be doing just brilliantly, and another part can be feeling a lot of strain. And so it gives you an idea of saying, well, what makes a difference between this part of the organization and that one? And you can learn a lot there. And the other is developing measures. So developing questionnaires that assess burnout per se, other questionnaires that assess the workplace and what are the important issues for people there. And another one on just how people interact with each other. So part of what designing, testing out, exploring the possibilities of these questionnaires and which ones are going to give you the information that you really need in order to make some good decisions.
And what would you say are the gold standards at the moment in terms of the measures that we use in org psych to look at burnout?
Oh, so the gold standard measure for quite a while has been the Maslow burnout inventories that has a couple of versions, one of which is particularly for healthcare people, another of which is very general. It could be used for healthcare workers, but it can be used for other folks as well. I like that when I'm doing research in a hospital, because we usually want to survey the people who aren't doctors and nurses as well as the people, and to have them on the same sort of metric there. But it's the gold standard in that 90+% of the studies published on burnout have used that measure, as opposed to other measures that are developed, but also that it maps right on how the World Health Organization has officially defined burnout, which is this combination of exhaustion, cynicism or depersonalization, and a lack of accomplishment. That it's this three-part syndrome. When a lot of other measures do it either just as exhaustion or just as a two-part thing. But that measure aligns with, again, how you can see burnout in the most, in-depth fashion.
And in terms of your work, you're obviously looking at expanding on some of those areas, or that there's some fine-tuning to do?
Oh, yeah, there's always fine-tuning. You always learn a lot. And you also want to see how it's developing over time. A particular thing that we've worked on, you want to talk about measures, because I like talking about measures. So you stop me if I get too far into the weeds. I don't know how far in the weeds you go these days. But what you have is a measure that has three things that it's three sort of subscales, three subcomponents. And one is just on the exhaustion. How tired are you? Particularly, were you tired even before your day began? Those kinds of things, which is much more important in this thing than being tired at the end of the day. That just shows you worked hard. But if you're tired before the day starts, that shows things are not quite jiving in the way they should. So that's a thing. And then the other is sort of, are you really excited and getting fulfilled by what you're doing? Are you really going, this another interview, I got to talk to this guy? Is it that kind of cynicism, distancing is the second piece. And the third piece is, do I really think I'm doing important work and I'm good at it? That's the place people like to be. And if you're losing that, then that's unfortunate. And burnout is, all three of those sort of piling on to each other. So you're discouraged and you're sort of cynical and you're just not confident that you're really even doing a good job anymore. That's that state of burnout. It's very serious, and it's hard to get out of that because it's so negative. But we find, when you analyze the scale, more of the recent stuff that we've looked at, that there's a chunk of people who are in that, they've got all three going and it's a problem. But there's another chunk that maybe sometimes a bigger percentage who their issue is that they're just exhausted. They're not cynical. They really love, they love their work. That's part of why they're so tired, because they're doing it so long. They're doing it too much. They're just so much involved in it. And they're not discouraged. They think they're saving lives. They're doing important work. They're doing really creative, interesting things. They're just really tired, which could be the work demands. It could be that their life is, so chaotic that they can't really get the rest that they need. It can be a number of things, but their issues are tired. And that, in a way, is a simpler problem to solve than being tired and discouraged and cynical and grumpy and, that kind of thing. They're more open to suggestions. It's a more straightforward issue. You're working, you got too much demand, you got not enough rest. That's not that complicated an equation. It can have some hard things to resolve, but the equation is pretty simple, right? Whereas with the other, it's much more complicated. And then you find there are other people who their issue is they're just whether they're feeling they're accomplishing anything. They might not be really stressed out from their job. They got a job that's just a job. It's not really traumatic in any way. They're not having to work extremely long hours. In fact, they can work their 37 and a half hours and they go home. They're not allowed to work any more than that. So it's not like they're exhausted or really cynical about it, but they just don't think they're accomplishing anything particularly great. And that really is a bigger piece. Like there's people who are really excited, they're energetic, they are really involved in things, they know that they're accomplishing great work, and they're really engaged. They're just, this is great. But that's not, it's not like there's them and then there's the burnout people and that's all there is. No, there's a lot going on in between. And one of those in between states is people just say, well, it's okay, I'm fine, that's a job, but it's not great. Is it Friday yet? Oh gosh, it's still Monday. No, I guess it's Tuesday for you. But anyway, it is that kind of a thing. But and then there are also a smaller group, but meaningful, that are just cynical. They're not exhausted because they really can't be bothered to make the effort. But they'll always complain to you about how awful things are and how badly things are run and how they could do a much better job of doing this than the people running this place. And they're just cynical and they're distant and they don't really care about the work or the people or anything anymore. But they're not really burned out. They're just cynical, grumpy people, and you see them coming, and you hide behind a filing cabinet or something. Just here they come again. I don't want to listen to it. But so those are like three extra states that you sort of capture with this scale that are in between being really engaged, excited, and energetic on the one end and being burned out and discouraged and exhausted on the other. So the measure lets you capture that. You have to do a sort of a fancy analysis with it in order to sort of categorize things that way. But if you have a big data sample and you run the numbers, you can see, there's people with this full burnout syndrome. But there are other people, their issue is they're exhausted, but they're not. They're really believing in things and they're really confident, but they're just exhausted. That's a different kind of person. They have a different set of expectations. They're going to be responsive to a different set of programs, of things that you could be doing to help out. So it's important to know the difference so that you can target. Like when I think of targeting, like on if you're a manager or a trainer or a organizational consultant, like how you can approach the problem in a way that's going to be suited to that issue that is really foremost for those people.
Obviously, the equation of the, I suppose, person who's exhausted is a fairly simple one, as you mentioned, in terms of they're just doing too great a volume of hours, and I'm assuming the intensity for a lot of those people would be fairly high as well. They are people who are highly driven or have got so much responsibility on their shoulders, coming from probably all sorts of areas, not just work, but probably life as well, and other demands. Because when you squeeze in so much work, you're probably then frantically trying to catch up at home and socially and the other things as well. So there's an equation in there which almost says, like, pump the brakes a little bit, slow things down, reflect on what your life looks like and see if you can make some adjustments, and whether something changes there, some better quality sleep and the like will probably all helps, and many other things that go with that. What are the contributors to those other two states where there's that someone who's feeling, kind of a bit cynical or discouraged, that depersonalization? What is it that brings people toward that state? Are there some markers that you see commonly correlated with why people go into that state?
Yeah, I think that people approach work. I mean, you go to work to make a living, to get paid, but you also want to use your skills. You want to accomplish something, right? People are motivated to experience themselves as capable, right? You don't want to think of yourself as somebody who just can't do anything. You want to have a place where you can go in, you can do what it is you've learned how to do, what you've been trained to do, what you've picked up along the way, and do it well, and get the confirmation that you're good at this, and that people, and you want to belong to a group that not only tolerates you showing up every day, but actually values you and thinks that you're really an important, and they get that across to you that, okay, wow, we're really glad you're here. Like this place would really, we'd be in a tizzy if you weren't showing up and doing and contributing the way you are. People want to belong, not just be around other people. They want to belong in a way that other people respect them, appreciate them, and connect with them that way. And they also, another thing is sort of people want to have some chances to show initiative. Like you don't want to always be on the receiving end of somebody else's agenda, somebody else's game. You want to be able to define, I'm making things happen here. I'm the one who made that happen. That is a very satisfying thing for most people. They really, and they're in a place where that happens for a lot of people is through your work. Like your work gives you resources. It puts you in contact with other talented people. It gives you this opportunity just to make things happen, to do things that you don't do all by yourself. Like, this equipment, you don't have these connections and opportunities that you can find at work if it's the right kind of workplace. So what happens when people are looking for that, hoping for that, expecting that? That was what I was promised when I got this job, and it ain't there. And instead, you're finding you're constrained, you're being micromanaged, other people are making those decisions. You don't really get to initiate what you want to do. The people around you, actually, they don't seem to like you at all. They're actually, I don't like them after a while because they're being disrespectful, they're ignoring you, or actually being downright rude. You really start, people draw back at that point. They are, and that's where a lot of that cynicism comes from. You're trying to protect yourself from an environment that is really frustrating. Like you're these core motives about being a capable member of a team that's really contributing something are being really, frustrated by where you are working. And that's the kind of stuff that contributes, it pushes people towards being really cynical, or if it's the really discouraged, I can't really accomplish anything here, I'm just doing this job. Those are the kinds of things that do that. And that's where we think, we look a lot at relationships among people who work together as being key. Are there signals coming among these people that are letting them know that you're respected? Are they just getting that across to each other automatically as they're going through their day? Or are they being really withholding that kind of confirmation for each other? So so for the first instance, you look at the work demands and how they wear people out and how they can recover from those. And that's important, and that's part of it. But these other dimensions really are what starts building the framework that pushes people towards a full burnout experience, is when they're being really frustrated and their other core motives.
And how are workplaces set up to try and mitigate against some of those factors? I'm assuming that a lot of people within a lifetime, let's just call it 40 years of work, that at some point aspects of these might show up. Are workplaces trying to address these particularly, or is it kind of we just go along, we do our work, and when troubles come by, we try and sort of intervene on a one-on-one level? What's been your experience? How do you see organizations work at this?
I think it's a very mixed world out there with organizations. And I think that, and often people, like I've done some analysis where we've looked at, again, within healthcare settings where we have a lot of people, and look at, how are they scoring on things in the first 6 months and the first 2 years of their career. And unfortunately, usually they start off really, really bright. Like, oh, this is just wonderful. I'm out of university. I'm into doing what it is I meant to do. It's just great getting these opportunities. And that's where they are in the first 6 months. And then about 2 years in, they're going, well, I guess it's okay here. And then about 5 years in, they're going, oh, gosh, when do I get to retire? And so going. Okay, so it can look really good. Things can work at the beginning. And part of it is that when you go starting new, you're going in like a trainee kind of position. You're being closely monitored and you don't get that much latitude and that many opportunities. You're trying to just take it in and not trying to actually, do your own. But after a while, you think, I should get some room here. I should have a bit of respect and get a little bit of autonomy to do, try something new. And they go, no. So too many places are like that. No, you don't. And they find what was a really nice sort of starting position doesn't evolve into a kind of a more mature position in a way that's going along with what the person is looking for. So you get a lot of people, there's sort of a mismatch between how the individual is developing and how their opportunities are developing. And there's sort of, and we, the universities are a little bit guilty in all this, well, because we sort of teach people to expect great things and to follow their dreams and to become what they can become. And a lot of workplaces, like, there are fewer positions that allow that than there are people who are looking for that. Like, that's sort of a mismatch in that way. There's a lot of people who are looking for that great creative, open kind of position. And there's only so many of those, and a whole lot more that are much more constrained and structured and have a lot less of that opportunity. So I think that's part of the thing going on, is that it but also there are employers who really care about that, and are trying to do their best for their employees and developing, occupational health programs and that kind of thing. But they don't always match what's going on. Like, a lot of times what they're doing is helping people put up with the situation that they're in. Like, you're managing your stress, but that means you're managing your stress. We're still stressing you out, but you're managing it better. And that's not quite as fulfilling for people as actually having something where they're really working with a flow that really connects with them and carries them forward. So there's that kind of thing. And then, as I've been working on these projects where we're trying to take work groups and that have a difficult time really being supportive of one another. Maybe there's different cliques that are fighting it out with each other, or maybe there's a leader who really is more involved with, leader things and not really focusing on what the people need as much as they care for, and work with them on just what we call sort of improving workplace civility. Like, how do you just get across to each other? Let's practice this. Let's do some things together here as a group and practice how we express appreciation to each other, so we can just get more automatic in that and express, not just feeling appreciative of each other, but actually saying something and doing things that gets that across in the little day-to-day interactions that were happening, and making sure people feel valued. And that kind of thing. And then teaching people, what are some more constructive reactions? If somebody really is rude or inconsiderate towards you, you can react in a way that makes that even worse, right? Or you can, but what are some things that as a group can come up with and say, no, this is when that kind of thing happens, here's how we're going to react. And it's like, here's our protocol for when people are behaving badly, so that we can help get things back on track again. And we're working together as a group. We're committed to doing that we're going to take our game up, and everybody's got to be on board, and people have to take some criticism with how they're interacting with each other and get better at it. And we're going to do that together. So that kind of thing, that starts building an environment where people are going to have that sense of belonging. They're going to have some knowledge that their colleagues have confidence in them, and it's going to build on those things that work against burnout. And we find that, I've done my own research and others that as that sense of, the more that the interactions that you encounter are really respectful, are rather than disrespectful, that people move away from those characteristics of burnout and into that more engaged space. As
a clinical psychologist, when clients come in with what appears to have those factors of burnout, there's only one person in the room, and that's the client. And the organisation isn't there. And so I'm working with the client really on an individual basis, somewhat appreciating that predominantly organisational structures, cultures are not so flexible or amenable. That doesn't mean that individuals wouldn't still go to their peers or wouldn't go to their managers, that wouldn't kind of try and work these situations out, whether it's finding more acknowledgement for their work or finding more accomplishment and pride in what they're doing, feeling satisfied that they've achieved something. But how much of this is the responsibility of the individual? Because where I sit, I can only work with the individual. And how much is the responsibility of a culture trying to fit that individual or work with that individual? It's a bit of a hard question. It's a bit of a controversial question in terms of how do we do this as a big world?
Well, it is a tough one because, I mean, as I look at it, it's a relationship problem. And I think you used that framing earlier in our conversation. And so what you're doing in this way is somewhat parallel that you're somebody's coming to you that's got a terrible marriage and you're working with one person and the other one's not there. So you're trying to do marriage therapy with one person. And you maybe can do something there, but it's so actually even risky, but it's hard. It's going to be, your chances of success are going to be a lot more if you've got both members of the relationship in the room. And so that's just sort of, and as an organizational psychologist, I'm generally working on the other side of that relationship with the organization, but I do connect with the individuals as well to some degree. But it is that kind of conundrum in a way. Now, individuals, like as I see it, with working out anything in relationships and particularly these work things, that one thing it requires that's going to help a lot is flexibility, both from the employer's point of view. The more that you can accommodate, people want to work in different ways, different places, different schedules, different degrees of responsibility, that kind of thing. And the more that you've got a capacity to accommodate different working styles, the better chances are that things are going to work out, in a way that, but also from an individual's point of view, like you're going to work that there's only so rigid you can be and still be playing the game properly here. Like people have to be able to accommodate, it is a work situation. They do want you to do certain things in certain times in certain places with certain kinds of output. And that needs to be, you've got to be able to accommodate that to some degree. When you're dealing with other people at work, people are difficult to deal with. There's just a lot of people are difficult. Like there's a certain degree that are just an endless delight, but overall, it's a challenge to deal with people at work, and particularly if you're dealing with folks who've got, who are really talented people and they know it, they're going to have ego issues and control issues and all of that. And part of, an individual's capabilities is how do you manage that so that the other person is feeling good about this as well. So you have a certain amount, but again, when you're working through an individual, that's your pathway to doing things, and it goes to what extent can that individual both vary what they're doing, can they do things differently, and then how much is that really going to have an impact? Because no matter how persuasive one is, there's a limit to how much you can really influence people in the positive direction. Like generally, as we talk about with the civility stuff, like reciprocity is powerful. If you go up to people and are really pleasant and respectful and really appreciative of them, that generally that's what's going to come back. And if you go up to people and you're rude and dismissive, or you just walk by and ignore them, that's what's going to come back too. So there's a certain reciprocity has a lot of power, but it's not totally powerful. I mean, you can go up to some people and be really nice and they're still going to be nasty to you. Like it's not 100%. It's your probabilities go up, but It's not for sure. So that's the kind of thing that I guess with working with individuals, getting them to tolerate the idea that they don't have sure things, but they can, if they can be happy with improving their odds for getting a better response, that can be meaningful for them.
What can people do to elongate that period of satisfaction? What is it that kind of occurs over time that makes us feel less and less satisfied, or more and more tired with the job, or a little bit cynical? As a psychologist, our jobs are fairly straightforward in terms of what we're going to do, and unless you, it depends, unless you change lots and lots of, unless you move your discipline around and the like, and maybe that's one of the factors. But for me personally, I have to maintain an enjoyment in seeing clients and continually find that really enjoyable if I want to continue doing my work. Thankfully, I'm probably very, very fortunate. I can't think of anything more interesting. Human beings are a puzzle, and they're so fascinating and enjoyable to work with. For me, the pain, the angst, comes from all the paperwork that I do. Running a practice. I enjoy people. I don't enjoy, the administrative side of running a practice, and so that's where kind of I feel the exhaustion, or I don't feel much satisfaction in doing some HR tasks and the like, but I still love seeing my clients. There's a bit of a mismatch occurring in my world of where I feel most suited, and in some sense another area of me that says, but I feel satisfaction if I could be part of growing a practice. So the question in some sense is, how do we keep that stimulation, that enjoyment alive? What do we need to do as individuals?
Okay. Wow, that's a lot of stuff there. But I think that it talks about burnout. People often bring up the concept of compassion fatigue. And part of my response has always been, well, I find that people have a lot of compassion. It's administrative nonsense fatigue that really pushes people towards burnout, and not too much compassion. Compassion's got a lot going for it. But I think, part of what you do is people mature, and that's part of what's going on. And it really, what works, at one stage of your career definitely will not work at another stage of your career, because people change, and you got to have, that's where the flexibility comes in, that you can add different things to it. Like some people start podcasts in order to add that to their clinical practice as a way of exploring ideas and connecting with the world and being with things. So there are, and that's what people, do when they mature through a career, when there is the latitude in order to do that, whether it's mentoring other providers, or, just there's so many different ways. All these professions and the kinds of things that where people really experience burnout are often the more complex and more, far-reaching kinds of occupations that, really take in your passion to such a degree. There's always different facets to that. And people, one, on their own side, need to have the flexibility to be able to, jump into something new, even though it's brand new. So they're not going to be really good at it at first, but they'll, have the confidence that they'll grow over time. So I think there's that piece. And then and the other part is the perpetual problem solving to figure out, how can we run this place with less paperwork and still be, cover all the bases that need to be covered. And that kind of thinking, creative thinking on the administrative side, is an important kind of thing, because because they can create all these forms and call for all these records and this, that, and the other. Well, they do. And again, worked at a university for many, many years, and the universities just love coming up with forms that, this is useless information, or reports, particularly research councils. They love having people write reports that nobody ever wants to read. Nobody's going to read this stuff. It's just, but if you want the next, payment to come to the university from your research grant, you've got to get them this stupid report that nobody wants to read. And the world just, okay, what can we do to, one, how can we make that report writing more efficient so that I've got a template I can run through and get it done in less time than I did last time, and on my own front. But how can we influence the whole administrative process so that they can see that wasting the time of their top talent is not a brilliant way of administrating, and that they can work with you to make it better. So I think that those are, because reducing the kinds of things that are just tedious nonsense is an important part of preventing burnout. You want to spend more time doing the stuff that really matters and less time doing the silly stuff that somebody has inflicted upon you from far.
It's really interesting, and maybe I'm reaching some of that cynical aspect that you're talking about, in that I scratch my head with how human beings engage with the world, and like the lack of interpretation or lack of reading, or maybe it's the kind of very quick default systems of reading and applying things where, let's say, for example, if I'll use something a little bit further afar. If someone put an application, put an ad out for a job which said, mechanic wanted, no apprentices, right? But then they received like 4 apprentices applications, and it's really fascinating that kind of like the reading, sort of concept doesn't translate to what someone then responds with. I personally, I know that when I write an email, I always try and respond to the 5, questions that someone has provided, or I'll ensure that whatever I'm being asked, I deliver. But it doesn't seem to occur in this world, that there's kind of like these shortcuts that are occurring where, someone will just half answer 1 of 5 questions. It's really fascinating that this world, and maybe that's the complexity of being of working with human beings, when you're relying on them. If you're not relying on them, it's probably not an issue. You're relying on them, it's a bit of a problem. It could be, I'm trying to pick up the keys, what's the location I need to go to, and they just forget to, they give you the address, but they don't tell you where they're going to leave it. It's like, is it under the pot, or is it, under the doormat? And so it requires more from you to, find out the information.
So much is so superficial and just missing, often just completely missing the point. It's true. And there's, even, back to the idea of sort of all this sort of administrative nonsense that people have to do in their jobs. Like, a lot of it sort of looks like it's something responsible or important, but it's not. It is just has sort of some kind of, appears to be something that is necessary without actually being something necessary, but it becomes a regulatory kind of thing going on, and it misses the point. So getting right down to the depths of things is a difficult place to stay. It's a difficult place to stay.
Has the advent of emails changed how people feel burdened with administration? I know that once upon a time, unless people were sitting around writing lots and lots and lots of letters and posting them off, is the advent of email something that has just increased the volume of communication these days? Does that have any contribution with how people are feeling in their work? I know it's different in the health sphere. I imagine being in a hospital, well, it depends who you are. You
Mhm.
might not need to do that volume. You might be more with patients doing forms. But is email, or is it the whole, emails and forms and regulatory sort of requirements that's weighing a lot of people down?
Well, it's a lot of pieces there. I think that part of it, emails are one dimension of the fact that work has become so portable and in terms of space and time, and that because you can, do work-related, communications at any time of the day or night, and you can feel compelled, like really compelled, or just imagine that you're compelled to respond to these things at all kinds of hours of the day or night. But that's just part of a larger thing. Like work is, there's different kinds of work. Like when you're seeing clients, that happens at a certain time and a certain place. But with the writing of reports, well, that can creep into other parts of your life. That's a more portable kind of activity. But even further beyond that is you thinking about what you're going to be doing with your client, thinking about this particular person's issue. That doesn't stay within a nice, tidy time frame. Like I'm writing a book, like Christina Maslach and I are writing a book about burnout. And when I'm writing a book about burnout, it doesn't stay within certain hours of the day or the writing time. The writing, the thinking, the ideas, the toying with things, trying to come up with different images or examples of things. Well, you're always thinking about that. Even when you're not thinking about it, all of a sudden an idea pops up, which means that you were processing it somewhere or the other. So much of work now is like that. That's where I'm going to go with it before I get into too many details. So much of work now doesn't really fit within a framework of time and space, which means in a way it puts a burden on both employers and on individuals. As an individual, in a way, you've got a part of responsibility for drawing the line and say, I am going to clear my mind as much as I can from work and to be, separate from that and to have my time for recovery and bouncing back, because that's really important. Employers need to know like what kind of messages they need to give across about, we know like there is only part of your life that's work and there's other parts of your life that we're not making demands on, and to be credible and saying that so that people actually do take it seriously, because that kind of capacity to get away from it all and to stand back from work is an important piece of it, and something I think in this past year, people around the world so we're dealing with the COVID crisis, particularly healthcare workers, the idea that the demands gotten very, very big, and on the other side, their capacity to recover and to get away from it all. You just have, fitness centers being closed down where you can't go there, where you usually went to sort of unwind after work, and you can't go to the bar and have a good drink. You can't go out to a restaurant. You can't actually spend much time with your friends. Like all these things that were the recovery activities for the people with huge demands were totally disrupted, made unavailable. And so in that world, you've got the demand for many people increasing, becoming extremely intense and emotionally charged. At the same time, you're losing all these opportunities to step back from it. And it's really intensifies the impact of these things, because you need that balance between getting away from it as when you've been so intensely involved on the other hand.
Two things that you noted there is work bleeding into a wider amount of time in one's life, or even the thinking of work or the anticipation of work, beforehand is kind of like a little bit of a drain, or a bit of weight that still can be put into the work hours that you're doing. And secondly, you sort of mentioned about recovery. How important is recovery, and what does that look like? What what can our listeners sort of think about in terms of what could they consider or should they do in that recovery side, or if we even term it, life outside of work?
Yeah. Well, I think it's partly, the idea with the exhaustion part is burnout. The idea isn't that you're supposed to go to work and hold on to all your energy all day. No, you should go to work and to cash in that energy doing things that matter, doing things like, and if you end up really tired at the end of the day, that's fine. That's not a problem in and of itself. The issue is the cycle is to cash in your energy doing things that matter, but then to recover that energy and doing something different. And you have different kinds of energy. So you can be working, again, seeing clients all day long until you're just really tired from doing that kind of work, and then go out and run and exercise physically and have a great time doing that. Somehow you've got energy for doing that kind of thing when your mind's been really tired of trying to respond appropriately to intense information. So you've got these different dimensions. What the kinds of recovery becomes the important thing of knowing, am I leading my life in a way that when I get away from work, I'm building up those other parts of it and recharging that energy. And it means, one, doing things that you enjoy, secondly, doing things that are different. So if you're at a computer screen all day, you really shouldn't go home and be at a computer screen all evening. You got to have a bit more breadth in what's going on. But it is, and time with people matters. Time with people where you're not in your work role. You're just a fella. You're just a person out there interacting with other people. It really recharges you. Like that work role is important. You're at home in it. That's who you are. But still, you got other parts of your identity, and they need to go out for a walk. They need an airing, and you got to be with them and allow that to happen. So all of those things, they bring out different parts of yourself. Even though, like you're walking around, you're doing things, you might be even more physically exerting than you do during your workday. But those things are part of recovery. Recovery can be a very active process. So eventually, you do need to sleep, and the amount of sleep that you need, you got to do it. And if it's 8 hours, even though you grudgingly you got to give it the 8 hours if that's what your body's calling for, and because it doesn't take no for an answer very well. It comes back to bite you. So the sleep becomes a very important part of that. And so finding out what's going to help you with that, because, when we do these, they're called diary studies, where you ask people to sort of every day, you give them sort of a mini version of the burnout scale, and you do it on a daily basis for a number of days just to see people's cycles. And the thing that, is most associated with exhaustion in the morning is not sleeping well on the night before. And not sleeping well the night before often is related to, upsetting things that happen at work, like conflict with other people or, bad interactions with people at work are one of the kinds of things that interrupt sleep at night, because you ruminate over these things. You think them, you bring them back up again, you're going over it, and it really upsets that whole recovery cycle. So sleep is definitely part of it. It's not the whole picture at all, but it's definitely part of it. And again, as communities have been all, constrained, necessarily with restrictions. It's really, people have had to come up with some pretty creative solutions about, well, how do I do that kind of recovery? And it's been a bad year for extroverts in that regard. The introverts have done a bit better. I just read a book, but the extroverts, they had a rough year. Yes. Yeah.
And how do you personally structure your days? Being in the field, do you consciously do certain things? Have you structured your weeks in particular ways?
Oh yeah, I'm good at relaxing. I've got that sort of worked out. One is I play music a lot, so that's a piece. That's a very different kind of activity, and with people or on my own or whatever. So that's really different from doing organizational psychology. And right now, I lived in Melbourne there for a while, and that was fascinating. There's so much to do in Melbourne. But now I'm living in a very small town of like 4,000 people and a very rural part of Canada. And so there's just always lots. There's a great outdoors, and so there's a lot of nature, walking, having a lot of green around you, walking in nature. It's a good thing to do. It relaxes the mind on a deep level.
What sort of music do you play?
Well, I play different kinds of music, but one thing is on the flute, playing like Celtic music, and so Irish, Scottish, that kind of thing. So that's with people and that stuff. Play Baroque music as well as the piano and flute, and other kinds of just more contemporary kind of music. There's people composing just fantastic stuff out there these days, particularly piano music. I'm just finding there's all kinds of very contemporary composers on piano that it's just fun to play it. Not horrendously difficult, but really engaging kind of music. So there's a lot to do with that. Yeah. How about you? Play music?
No, I don't. But as you were talking, I saw not only the organisational psychologist, but the musician as well. When I have been speaking with you, I've seen Michael, the academic, the organisational psych, the researcher, and as you spoke about the music and you kind of shifted your eyes up and you kind of reflected and got into this sort of, mental space of considering what is it. So that's so lovely. I could see a genuineness and a love for, whether it be the Celtic music or the appreciation or, learning or the playing or the social aspect of it. There's clearly a very important dimension there, which probably is what you're trying to refer to as recovery, being strong in other interests. Things you can immerse yourself in that, not because we should all have hobbies, but because it's a genuine interest. You're a human being that's multifaceted, and one of those things is playing flute.
Yeah, and you can't give all your passions over to work. Work's not going to look after you that well. You've got to have something else going on in your life.
And that's part of the meaning making of life as well. It is. If it's just work, there's just not enough areas to keep us interested, unless you're very good at making work flexible and move with you as you mature. But I'm assuming the vast majority of us need a lot of pleasure outside of work.
You really do. Yes.
Yeah, wow. It makes me think about the things. I've got some really strong interests, but probably I need to invest more time and energy into those, actually invest the time so that I get recovery from it. Rather than just fantasize about it.
Yes, it takes a while. Yeah, it takes some dedication before it really becomes feeding back to you in that kind of way. But you got to get learning just in and of itself. It's a kick.
Mm-hmm. And is that why there's a novelty factor in this, where when someone graduates from uni, the first couple of years. There's so much novelty. When we change jobs, we're looking for novelty. We're trying to kind of spice things up again. Is that part of what kind of keeps us a bit more buoyant? Is that we need a bit of change?
Oh, that is. And I think that goes to that sort of need for that sense of efficacy. And people really want to feel that they are capable. And that it just gives you it just gives you confidence, because you got to deal with a world which is pretty demanding and not all that friendly. Just knowing that you are capable of what you're doing both makes you just more confident that you can deal with what comes up, but also, it makes you more valuable to your community. And so you've got other people who have your back because you're a valued member. That's just it's really wired in at a fairly fundamental level, I think. And so when you're learning new things, when you're mastering, capabilities, that it gives some depth to you in that way.
Michael, if some of our listeners want to take this a little bit further, where can they find out more about your work, about the things that you do? Do you have a website or something we can share?
Right. I have a website. It's the letter MP Leiter. So it's MPLEITER, which is Michael P. Leiter, .com. So that's easy enough. So that's the place where you can see some of my stuff is posted there, and there's a way of contacting me through that site as well. So that would be the way to go.
Fantastic. And before I let you go, a little bit more on a personal note, what attracted you to leaving Australia and going to Canada?
Oh, well, I was from Canada. I
Originally?
Most of my career here in Canada, but I had a 3-year gig over at Deakin University, so it was sort of an adventure for me to go to Australia for that time, and we just loved it. But it was a time limited opportunity, and now we're back here. But I whenever the world gets back to itself again, I do intend to visit Australia once again.
Are there strong similarities? I've heard a lot of people talk about some really strong, at least nature similarities between the two countries, where there's large sort of almost kind of barren desert type areas, right. And then there's lots of this really rich green forestry and beautiful lakes and wilderness. Is that true? Because I've always wanted to go to Canada because you see these beautiful pictures, but you don't know what the whole of it looks like.
Oh, right. Well, yeah, the whole of it's pretty darn, but yeah, it's big. And there's a whole lot in the middle that's rather barren. I've been to, the north on occasion, and there's parts of the Canadian north. It's just rocks and ice and rocks and ice and rocks and ice. and so it's like the middle of Australia, except really, really cold. And that's the thing. And Canada, like as with Australia, you've got, wildlife out there that can kill you. It's just in Canada, they're really big things, and in Australia, they're little things. So you got to sort of watch in a different direction. But they both have wildlife that's serious wildlife. But and also, they're both Commonwealth countries. They've got the money looks very the paper money looks very similar. With the Queen, it's just, it took me a while to get straight. Oh, there are some differences here. But so there's a lot that's that way as well. So it's very comfortable for Canadian, Australian going back and forth between these countries. There's a lot that's familiar in that regard.
I'll have to make sure I come and visit once restrictions ease and have a little bit of a sticky beak around.
Likewise. Okay. And I'll go, okay. We will connect again. Okay.
Sounds good. Fantastic. Many, many thanks again, Michael. Really appreciate you coming onto the show, taking the time and sharing your great wisdom. I think there's a lot of takeaways from our conversation for our listeners and certainly for me as well. There's a few things I think I can take away, and I'll probably be engaging in actively doing more of my passions outside of work to try and balance that recover. I think is a nice idea as well. So appreciate those nice little gems, and look forward to meeting up at another time.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you, and it's just been a great conversation. It's put a lot of good ideas in my head as well. So it's fantastic. So good to meet you.
Thanks, Michael. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.